Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for bearing with us. We were in executive session. Didn't want to break before we're finished discussing what we needed to. It's now 7:20. We'll call the meeting to order, and all members are present. And we'll begin with the transmitting of Treasury warrants 24, 24A, 25, 25A, 26, 26A, 27, 27A, 28, and 28A. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor? It's unanimous. Our 7 o'clock appointment this evening is with Kwong Bui Pink Melon Frozen Yogurt. It's regarding a request to obtain a common victual license for property located at 269 Main Street. Good evening, sir. Have a seat. I hope that I pronounced your name correctly or close at least. We're in receipt of your application, and certainly we're going to ask for recommendations from the administration. Before we do that, I wonder if you could just quickly tell us about the proposed business and the location and what you have in mind.
We open in 211 on 269 in Plaza, and we open frozen yogurt for the machine pull out, look like other store. And we look like to open from 11 o'clock to 11.
Okay. And 269 Main Street is the Wilmington Crossing Plaza, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You covered your hours. Is there anything about the business that you want to add, or do you want us just to ask
Just
for
frozen, look like ice cream and drinking, Pepsi, Coke, like that. That's all.
Okay. Do we have recommendations, Mr. Hull?
Yes, I have a recommendation from Shelley Newhouse, Health Director. I recommend approval of the common victuals license, Pink Melon Frozen Yogurt located at 269 Main Street, subject to meeting all the requirements of the Board of Health. And then from Building Inspector Al Spalding, this is an allowed use in the general business zone. There are no zoning issues.
Okay, any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the audience?
If I may, very quickly, Mr. Chairman, just to be more specific on the location, is it in Wilmington Crossing? It's if I'm looking at Chili's, is it to the left of? There's a cleaner, a dry cleaner there, and it's to the left of the dry cleaner.
Yeah.
In that spot there.
Yes.
There was an ice cream store before.
Yes, sir.
Is that the same spot?
Yes,
Okay.
same spot.
Is your intention to? I'm trying to get from the map. You'll have some sit-down service, some seating areas for patrons to sit in. And
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
but no waitress or wait service
No.
to the tables.
Yeah, just they self-service. They come, they pick up by themselves.
I see. Okay. Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions, comments, or motion from the board?
I would move to grant the common victuals license to Pink Melon Frozen Yogurt at 269 Main Street, Unit 215.
Second.
Made and seconded, all in favor? It's unanimous? It's a unanimous vote, and you'll be able to pick up that license from the manager's office tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good luck.
Good luck. Thank you.
Our next agenda item, scheduled for 7:05, is a Board of Selectmen discussion regarding the North Intermediate School Window Project. I'd like to invite owner's project manager, Tony Severs of Diversified Project Management, and George Hooper, Superintendent of Public Buildings, to the front table. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Mr. Manager.
And the board is in receipt of a letter to Mr. Hull dated January 8th under Tony's signature and Ms. Seaver's signature. So certainly the board has that backdrop, but if you could, for the benefit of those in attendance and those who might be watching, if you could cover what's contained in that from the beginning, would appreciate it.
First of all, I'll say that Diversified Project Management is owner's project manager firm that was hired by the town to handle the project, the North Intermediate Window project. It's a full replacement of windows and exterior doors on that school. And the town has elected to enroll in the MSBA's Accelerated Repair Program. And part of that program is to allow the MSBA to participate in the cost of the project, and also hopefully to provide the town some resources to, again, accelerate the program and get the programs of schools going. We were a recommended vendor as well as the designer for the project. That's part of the regulations of the Accelerated Repair Program. And so coming in, we were asked by the town to, evaluate the windows and to prepare a replacement program, which we did. And we went out with the designer, Gale Associates, did some preliminary designs and got an estimate for the project. The estimate was done by a professional estimator, North Bay, and they've done many, many, many window projects. And the cost of the project came in at a cost that was significantly higher than that was anticipated by the team from the town. And so they asked us to, try to get a handle on why the cost was so much higher than what the town had expected. And so we did some evaluation, and we were told that the amount of money that was previously budgeted for the town was created from a project that was done in the town not too long ago, the Shawsheen Elementary School. And so the immediate thing we looked at was, what are the comparisons between the schools and the projects? And it was a reasonable assumption by the team of the town to think that the budget was going to be approximately the same as the sizes of the schools is approximately the same. What in my world, it was easier to go back and look at what the differences were rather than to try to extrapolate at the time to prepare the price for the current North Intermediate School. And the immediate things that came to mind, that became apparent when we started analyzing the two projects was, number one, there was a little bit of apples and oranges. Although they're both schools, they both have windows, there's different types of window systems, different types of conditions within the building. The physical properties of the window systems that are at the Shawsheen School are significantly different than the ones that are being proposed at the North Intermediate. Other things that we looked at were what we call cost escalations. The actual cost of a project, as you all know, is when you actually get a bid from a contractor and he says that he'll do this job for this price. Until you get that bid, everything is an educated guess. And, we hire professional estimators to help us prepare and to make that best guess. But again, on bid day, anything can happen. There's a wide range of market factors that we try to predict for you to help you make a good decision going in so that you have the right amount of money to proceed with the job and the project doesn't get scrapped. We've had an interesting economic ride in the last several years from the time that you had the project out at Shawsheen done. And everything that the final conclusion that we've come to is that you got an unbelievable price at Shawsheen. You hit the right market time to do it. I think it was, you had a good designer, you had a good OPM, and everything all came, to your benefit at that project. I think that you got a cost from the contractor well below market value at the time. The contractor was probably very hungry, wanted work. In our terms, they were willing to take the project at a reduced price just so they could keep their people going. So the problem is that if you create that as the benchmark for the next project, you need to understand what can happen between that project and the new project at North Intermediate. And I'll, hit some of the things that we did. I can go into more detail on the differences between the two schools, but I think that it is what it is, if you'll pardon that expression. They are different, and we do have a design that is responsible and meets all the codes and requirements of the MSBA. Would you like to hear more about what the differences are? Is there any value to that?
Why don't you, feel free to give as much or as little detail as you want on each
Okay.
of the components, as long as you hit, the MSBA Accelerated Repair Program
Good.
and the escalation and market impact.
So I'll just keep going. I mean, the primary difference between the two schools is the Shawsheen had a vertical system. Curtain wall system. And the North Intermediate has ribbon system. If you've been by the school, you'll see the windows are a little bit shorter, but they go for a long, basically banding the school at 2 levels. What that does is it creates a head and a sill condition that is typically the most expensive part of this system. And so that's one significant difference between the schools, that even though the amount of glass may be very similar, the way you put them into the building is a lot more expensive. The other issue that was significant was that at Shawsheen, these elements were very modular and they were repetitive. That is, they could crank these out in their shop, and they didn't have a lot of field fitting of that those materials. Out at North Intermediate, almost every one of these windows is going to be different, and there's going to be a lot of individual one-offs in that particular case. Again, that's a more expensive way to build. And then the last part of the differing two structures is the way that the actual window is attached to the building. Over at Shawsheen, because we had a vertical system, the way where we clipped into the building support, there was fewer of those connections, and they were far simpler. Over at North Intermediate, to meet the new codes, meet all the wind requirements and all the other weatherproofing requirements, we're going to have a lot more connections on that, at that project. So again, additional cost. Some of the other reasons for the overall cost to be greater is at Shawsheen, you were able to get into the MSBA Green Repair Program, which is a very similar program to the Accelerated Repair Program. What you were, again, the timing was everything there. You started that project without being in the program, so a lot of the early on requirements were basically waived by the MSBA in that program. And the reason that it's a more intensive program for the Accelerated Repair Program is the MSBA is trying to streamline their process, and that basically shifts some of the costs of the MSB's administration to you. And so, again, the OPM costs are typically greater just because of the amount of reporting that we have to do. The architects and designers' expenses are greater. Again, we have to follow a lot of requirements that the MSBA has above and beyond the building code. So again, that's another item that caused your overall cost of the project to be increased over the Shawsheen School. I talked a little bit about escalation and market impact, and again, this is I don't want to overstress it, but it's a gamble in a way. An anecdote is that we've done several public bid jobs that were awarded in the last few months. Almost every one of them has been almost 10% higher than what the base budget was. Now, luckily, we had a contingency and an escalation allowance in there, but they all were higher. The part that scared me the most was that the difference between the low bidder and the next lowest bidder. And in a lot of those situations, they were almost 10% different as well. So you can see that if a contractor who was successful on those projects decided that this was not the right project for him, he won another project, or for some reason did not get a bid, we would have been, again, 10% more on the project. So to be responsible, we, working for the town, we have to create a budget that will minimize your exposure in that situation. So the budget that we prepared, I would not be surprised to find out that when we go to bid day, we get lucky, we find a bidder, and we may be 5 to 10% low on our budget. But you can't bank on that. You can't expect that to be the case. So what we found recently is that all these contractors in the past 3 years have been taking work at a reduced rate. That is, they want to keep their workers going, they want to, keep involved and put prices in, and if they need to, they're willing to take work even at a loss in order to keep going in the business. Well, they've done that for 3 years. The time's up. They can't continue to do this forever. So what we're finding is a lot of these contractors are deciding they're going to sit bids out. They're not going to go and bid everything in the world. They're going to pick and choose which projects they have and try to, see how the bidding is going, and they'll, not bid on one project, but hit another one that they think they can make their standard profit on. So that's something that's really developed in the last few years. The other thing is that for different trades, the escalation in prices has gone crazy. Aluminum is one, glass is another one. The cost of glass and the cost of aluminum has increased much faster than some of the other materials that we've seen. So that's another thing that's happened within the last 3 years since the time that you did your project in '09 was when the budget was prepared. It was built in 2010.
Yep.
And now we're, 2 years later, and furthermore, we're projecting this work to be done in the summer of 2014. The reason for that is, again, a window system is a complicated system. It has to be designed, all the details have to be worked out very intricately, and it takes time for them to be made. They have to make all the structure. They typically frame it up in their shop, then they have to cut all the glass to fit. So, it's not unusual for that to be a 6-month lead time. So we've worked out the schedule to be able to make this work, and the earliest opportunity we have to meet the school's occupancy requirements is the summer of 2014, and I'll go through that schedule in 1 second for you. So, but realizing that we're out in 2014, again, puts us at a greater escalation rate. We think, based on market trends, the estimators that we've been talking to, that we expect there to be a steady 3 to 5% increase in cost across the board in construction over the next 2 years anyway. So we actually predicted the next 5 years it'll be a steady 3 to 5% increase. Then the other thing that figures into this is that combined with these contractors who are realizing that they have to start making money again, they can't do work on the cheap, is a glut of specific type of work that's out there. And again, the MSBA work in schools is very cyclical. Again, everybody tries to get everything done in what we call the summer slammers in the summer. So what happens is we have this big onslaught of work in the summers, and then the contractors are all trying to get that work, but then they don't have work for the off times. So the contractors have a really tough time when they go in and they say, well, there's 10 schools out now with windows. So the odds of me getting one of those, may be tough for a specific window. So they'll raise their price so that they hit it, they'll get it. So it's just a subtlety to the whole supply and demand issue that we have. Now, I promised you I'd talk about the schedule a little bit. The way that we've worked out the schedule is the next step for us in the process is for the MSBA to review this project at their January 30th meeting. And what has to happen is we've given them a large set of documents that meets all their criteria. We know that they've been accepted. We've gotten the feedback from their employees already saying that they've accepted and are recommending our project for approval with the board. They approve it, and then within 90 days of that approval, the town has to come back to them with an appropriation of the funds. That is, they have to demonstrate that they have the funds to move ahead. For us, that next step would be either, the appropriation that's already been made or a new appropriation that would have to happen at town meeting. And your town meeting is scheduled for the 4th or 5th of?
May 4th.
May 4th. And technically, that's beyond 90 days after the meeting of the MSBA. But we have confirmed and we have confirmation from them that that will be acceptable to them, that they will not, that won't be a problem and will meet their guidelines. The next step is that within this accelerated program, hence the accelerated aspect of the program, the work was originally scheduled, all work had to be completed by the December 30th, 2013. We can't do that. There's no way for us to finish the design, order the windows, and get the windows installed in the summer of 2013. There just isn't enough time. So the next opportunity, given the occupancy of the school, would be the summer of 2014. So we engaged the MSBA and we told them what the situation is. And they are willing to allow us to go beyond that 2013 completion, given all the work that we've done and the need of the project, and also their current workload works well with that. So that's why we have scheduled that to happen 2014, the summer. So what we would do is we'd have the hearing on the 30th of January. We would have, wait for your town meeting, because again, it doesn't make sense to spend money at this point unless we discuss it further and there's a sweet spot in the bidding. But it would make sense to me to wait until your town meeting, whatever the results of that town meeting would tell us to proceed with the design of the windows, which would take 2 to 3 months, at which point we could, at that time, go to bid. Now, when you go to bid, you want to really weigh what the situation is out there, the climate. And we have a lot of ways of doing that. We talk to contractors directly. How much work do you have? What's coming up? What's to bid? Also, there's the central register of the Commonwealth that everybody has to put all the public projects in. And then there's also window manufacturers that we can tap into to determine what other projects are coming up. And we will help you try to make the best decision of when to go out to bid. Traditionally, November, December is a good time to go out to bid. Contractors have just finished the summer. They're looking out ahead. They don't know what they're going to have next year. So they would love to get a nice, $1 million project on the books for that coming up in that summer cycle. So traditionally, that's a good time to bid. Now, the flip side of that is a lot of times the MSBA may have, 4 or 5 window projects going out at that same time. Generally, we don't think that that's a advisable tack to take to go along with that. I think you're better off to have people focus on your project alone rather than trying to take a chance of winning one of the others. But again, that's something that once we get to that stage, we'll engage, George and Jeff, and we'll try to figure out what makes the most economical sense for you. So that's basically what I have of how we got here. I mean, I'm in a more enviable position, I think, than George, because I'm looking back and, doing some forensic analysis of, how you got from point A to point B. I think, sitting in a spot and trying to predict what something's going to be in 2 years is a very difficult thing to do, I think, especially given in, the time that, you went to get this project initially appropriated. I think that, it had every indication that the, economy was going to stay slow and, that you were going to be able to, capitalize on all those things. I think that, it just has not turned out that way, and I think that we've taken the right steps with our experts that we have to be able to make the best prediction we can for, what you're going to be doing in, 18 months.
We're well aware as a town and as a board of the escalating costs of labor and materials, and particularly the last 6 months. Just to bring it back a moment, I should have been more clear at the beginning that the purpose for tonight's meeting is by and large to make sure that the selectmen are aware of how this project is proceeding, to let the general public understand what the economic reality is, and as we prepare a warrant for town meeting, this is something that we'll be addressing. So there's not going to be any vote this evening that's going to, dictate what direction we take. It's more of a way of getting information disseminated. To that end, if I could ask the manager just to take a step back, and if you could remind us of what the appropriation was, how that appropriation was intended to be used in terms of MSBA contributions and reimbursements to the town, the ultimate price tag to the town, if you will. And then, given these more recent numbers and the recent trends, where that puts us, what we'd be looking at for town meeting, then I'd like to go to the board and for any questions or comments, and then the audience if there are any questions or comments. So if you could review that for us, if you could, Mr. Howell.
The article that was placed on the warrant was in the amount of $804,000. It was based upon some discussions with the designer that we had used for the Shawshene windows. Their best estimate as to what they believed the cost for a similar window project would be at the North Intermediate. The expectation was that we would pursue a similar program through the MSBA, figuring that we would receive approximately a 50% reimbursement. So the expectation there was that the state would reimburse us approximately $400,000, $402,000. That was the basis for the appropriation that was authorized. After we went through that process, we applied to be a part of the MSBA Green Repair Program, as is previously noted. One of the things that we did not anticipate was the additional level of scrutiny or requirements that the MSBA would have for this program. Just by way of example, one element of the project, under the Shawshene project, we spent approximately $84,000 for the so-called soft costs, which are the designer costs and the OPM. Under the this project, we're going to be spending approximately $207,000 for those services. So just right out of the gate, that was one cost that was fairly significantly higher than we were anticipating. Again, as it's been noted, the economy back at the time that we were projecting this was different than it is now. When we had Diversified come in and worked with them on the estimate, they took a look at a close look at the building window system and identified that there were, because of the differences that Mr. Seaver has identified, the cost, the cost to do that work was going to be more, even if you didn't factor in the inflation piece. We had a lot of discussions internally as to whether to proceed with this project. The last thing we want to do is have to go back to town meeting and request additional money. In the end, we concluded that it was in our best interest to pursue this. Number one, the window system at the North Intermediate is in serious need of replacement. I think it's an energy efficiency issue. Secondly, in terms of the expected reimbursement from the state, at this point, the project that's being proposed is the actual cost is estimated to be $1,478,000, of which the state would reimburse us $737,374. So the town's net cost, so to speak, would be $740,645. So essentially, the issue here is that in order for MSBA to accept a project like this, we have to fully fund it, even though it's clear that in this case, MSBA is going to fund or reimburse 49.94% of the project. We still have to fully fund it. So we raised and appropriated $804,000. We believe after the reimbursement from the state, the net cost to the town is $740,645, but in spite of that, we still have to raise the full amount.
Before opening it up to the rest of the board, I do have a question, and maybe you said it, Jeff, and I apologize if I missed it. You referenced the soft costs for the North Intermediate project under the Accelerated Repair Program for, I think, design and OPM together is 207.
Yes.
What was that same service? What was the cost of that service for the Shawsheen project?
It was approximately $84,000.
And I raised that question. You had given me that number when we discussed putting this on the agenda, and I frankly didn't remember it, but I remembered there was a big delta there, a huge increase in that. And the one point that I would have is that, and I want to preface this comment by making sure that what I say isn't taken out of context. Our state legislature, I think, did the right thing when they funded this program and created this program, and MSBA implements this program, and it's a great advantage to the town and many cities and towns like us. And I'm glad that we have a $747 or so thousand reimbursement available. So, I'm not trying to bite the hand that feeds us, and I recognize that this is sales tax money and that as residents of the Commonwealth we fund it, but nonetheless, when we're able to avail ourselves of significant state dollars, I don't want to be unduly critical. Having said that, clearly it is there is a cost associated with availing ourselves of that money, and that cost is a great example of that is our soft costs going from $84,000 to $207,000. And, I'm sure that part of that is driven by, and I think that the point was made earlier, there's this glut of these projects, and MSBA is cranking out these projects, and that has to create either what you might call a temporary or an artificial demand, which is being met, with increased costs on the supply side. So, I get that. Part of the success of the program is driving the costs up. And I also get that, the reality is that we don't, under this program, get to shop for OPM and design services. And I'm not speaking to the service we're getting. I think the manager and George would probably speak to the quality service that we're getting, but the fact of the matter is we can't go out and shop those services. So there is a dramatic increase in the cost. So, I for one want to make sure that we're being candid with the residents in town and acknowledging that, hey, part of this is, that the economy has just spiked and that we're seeing growth and increases in labor and materials that we all longed for several years. So, it's the good news, bad news, but there are also costs associated with the MSBA project that I think we have to be honest enough to recognize and hope that going forward, maybe some of those costs can be reined in by some changes in the MSBA program. So at that, I wanted to open it up to the board before we open it up to the audience.
Just out of curiosity, the contractor originally that you said gave us a great deal, I'm just curious, did he put in a bid for the project?
The North Intermediate project has not gone out to bid yet. And, I would, again.
Would you expect that he would do that?
I would expect him to bid the project. I think his experience with the town was good, and I think that, again, part of what you have to realize, though, too, is the contractor that you had specialized in the vertical curtain wall system that was installed there. So this may not be his cup of tea, so he may not be as competitive on here. But again, I fully expect him to
I was just
bid
curious
on
about
that.
that, that's all. Thank you.
Excuse me, my way of thinking is we're going to get the project done, which obviously is needed, for less than what we had originally budgeted because the upfront costs are going to be a lot more, obviously, for the reasons that Mr. Severs went over. But eventually, we're going to get the project done for less than was budgeted after all the upfront costs. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, and not to sugarcoat it, the reality is that appropriation was intended to fully fund the project and then get reimbursement.
Right.
So there's no getting around the fact the cost has increased dramatically. But yes, notwithstanding the fact that if we put this on the warrant and town meeting is inclined to vote favorably for the appropriation, the reality is that the appropriation from May of 2012 will be sufficient to actually pay for the project. Right.
Thank you.
Anything down here?
I think all the points have been made. I think, to your point, Mr. Newhouse, you talk about the state being there to reimburse it. The costs are definitely going up, and I think it goes back to the point that the municipal side of government and the public schools have always been very interested in programmatic design, but also in keeping the infrastructure of our schools. And so I look at this and say, in light of increasing costs, if we don't do anything, we're still going to have a need for windows and doors for the school for years to come. And the price tag is only going to go up. So will you be thinking, saving on a project today, the dollar that you don't spend today becomes more expensive tomorrow, and the need is still there. So aside from, supporting our faculty and staff and children in our schools, I think it's important. There's a strategic plan and there's a capital improvement plan for the town and for the schools. And I think, we've supported things up to this point. I don't see, from my standpoint, that I would want to change that thought process and that focus. And therefore, I would, regardless of the unfortunate news, I don't feel that there's any decision from my standpoint other than to support the project. So I think we should move forward.
Yeah, it's well said, Judy. It's a little bittersweet. Check my math. So if we were hoping that basing on the budgetary numbers from a couple of years ago from Shawsheen, that we could get out of this thing for a net of around $400,000. That was based on some assumptions. We came to the conclusion that in actuality, it's going to be to the net after MSBA reimbursements and everything of around 741. I'm just going to round 740. So I'm looking at around 350,000 extra dollars, something in that vicinity? Is that, am I up and down? All right. So we're looking for around $350,000 extra. To your point, Mr. Newhouse, and I think you made a very good one, and I appreciate you bringing it up. The MSBA process, such as it is, requires us to engage in it and pay fees, not fees, but incur costs that sometimes can be onerous. On the other hand, to Judy's point a moment ago, the cost of not doing something will continue to elevate. So it's a bit of a catch-22. In the absence of an MSBA program, we'd be looking at $1.5 million to do this very same project, all of it coming out of the town coffers, all of it having to be funded by the taxpayers of Wilmington. And we'd really have to be seriously considering doing the project anyway, because it just needs to be done, and as has been said, the kids need to have an environment in which they can learn without being cold or hot or wet. And we need to have efficiencies and do all the things that George and his team have been doing so well for the last few years. So, I agree with Judy. I'll be vocally in support of appropriating the funds, but it's a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow. I wish that there were ways to control some of these costs, but I think we have to acknowledge that the MSBA program, with all of its wrinkles, is affording us the opportunity to get $1.5 million worth of project for $741,000, and that ain't hay. So we should blaze forward. I'm glad to have this information. I wish it was better information, but it's good information nevertheless.
Okay. Yes, Superintendent Benton.
I just wanted to add, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong. MSBA makes one vote on the number. If we had gone in with a lower number and the cost came in higher, we couldn't go back to them to get more funds. My understanding is we're going in at the higher level with the hopes that through Tony's work, we're going to come in much lower than 1.4. So hopefully it will not cost that entire amount.
That's a very important point.
Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Lingenfeld.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question, and I asked it in ignorance, but I attended a presentation put on by EPA representative in November that addressed PCB contamination, the caulking and glazing, and I was kind of shocked that they were talking about removal of brick and impregnations, and have all those, so that didn't rear its head as an ugly surprise in the future, is that?
We've done testing on the site, preliminary, not full destructive testing. I mean, there's always a chance for a surprise, but everything the experts have gone in and looked at has shown that we're good here. We're not going to have to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments back there? Ms. McDonald, at the previous meeting, after ruling you out of order for the upteenth time at the upteenth meeting, I warned you if you continued to do that, it was my intention not only to move on with the meeting, but not to recognize you at all at the next meeting. And I'm standing by that, so I'm not recognizing you, sir.
Is somebody is concerned with almost $1 million?
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, I made a decision. It's not up for debate or discussion. It's within my province as the chairman. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. Mr. McDonald, this is not a public hearing. Let me take this. You're out of order. You're out of order.
That's a lot of money.
You're out of order. Mr. McDonald, you are incorrigible. You're incorrigible. Over the course of the last 2 years, this board has afforded you the opportunity to speak continually and time after time when you're ruled out of order, completely within the bounds of the open meeting law. You continue to throw words around like public hearing and to make those statements when they are not true. They're inaccurate. Now, Mr. McDonald, here's where we're at, okay? A police officer doesn't necessarily have to be the one to know when somebody's speeding. A lot of us can tell when somebody's driving too fast. And we don't need a toxicologist for us to know when somebody's had too much to drink.
I don't think.
And I'm no behavioral scientist, but I don't need one to tell me that your bizarre and confrontational behavior has consistently escalated over the course of the last 2 years. I'm speaking, you don't have the floor, sir. I'm speaking. At some point, I recognize the road that we're going down here, you know? And quite frankly, as a public servant, a volunteer public servant, like everybody sitting up here and like the thousands of people who volunteer to do productive things in this town, I'm not going to have it on me and my conscience if ultimately something happens where a situation in this room escalates. And by a situation, sir, I'm referring to you. I'm referring to you. So I'm not going to risk that. You know, it doesn't take
Would you like to
more
share how
than...
much you paid this guy?
Here, I'm sitting here again, time after time after time. You absolutely refuse to respect any order of the chair of this board or any other board that meets in public. Time after time after
Serious
time.
contradiction to what he said was the truth.
That's not what I'm talking about, sir. I'm talking about your
We need to
behavior
address
and
this
what
as a
you
public.
put us through.
And we need to find out
You-
where our dollars
Mi-
are going to,
Mr.
Mr. Newhouse.
Mr. McDonald, it doesn't take a behavioral scientist to see the road that you're taking this board down and the road that you're trying to take this town down. I'm not going to go there with you.
I don't know what road
I've
you're trying to
said,
take it down,
I-
Mr. Newhouse.
I've said,
When we
well, I'll
paid
tell you what I'm
250% more to
talking about.
design the same size
Mr.
school.
McDonald, what
That's
I'm,
an
ta-
issue, Mr. Newhouse.
Mis-
And you're
you
the head of this board, and
continuously
you let that
miss,
happen?
you continuously interrupt, you're confrontational, you make faces to the board.
Faces
Yeah.
to the board. Come on.
Listen,
Trying to get a
here's
serious question answered, and we can't get it answered.
Here's what we're going to do, Mr. McDonald. Here's what we're going to do. I'm making a judgment call, all right? I, as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, can't guarantee the personal safety of anybody. Our public safety experts can't guarantee the personal safety. They're here because you're here.
Police officers.
They're here because
What,
you're
guard
here.
A question? Are you
Mis-
serious?
Mr. McDonald, anybody who's observed you over the course of the last 2 years understands
What kind of leadership is
how
that?
dangerous you can eventually be. Let me tell you the bottom
You're
line.
dangerous with the spending.
Yeah. You can voice your opinion where you want, but at some point, one need only have to look at the lead story on a newscast or read the front page of a newspaper and ask yourself, you know, what could have been done to prevent something like this from happening? And here's what I'm telling you. Here's what I'm telling you.
Public meeting. trying
Here's
to
what
find
I'm
out where
telling
our
you,
dollars
Mr.
and cents are
McDonald.
going, Mr. Newhouse.
You're out of order. I've warned you tens and scores of times over the last 9 months, and I'm saying enough. Mr. McDonald, save only the situation of a public hearing at which I am obligated to elicit public comment from the audience. With the exception only of public hearings, you should not expect to ever be recognized in this room when I'm chairing this meeting. I'm not going to recognize you.
Well, I hope the voters
You
recognize
you
that
are
when
now
we get-
out of order,
come up for
and I'm
election.
going to ask the police officers in the back if you continue to interrupt this meeting to assist you in withdrawing from the meeting. Thank you. Our next discussion item, scheduled for 7:20, the Board of Selectmen discussion regarding the status of the high school building project. The purpose of this discussion item is really threefold. The first purpose is to update the general public about the status of the pending litigation, which involves the complaint of an abutter, Mr. O'Reilly, trying to appeal and overturn the decision, the final decision and final order of conditions of the DEP. We will have some discussion about that tonight, just for the purposes of updating the general public. We also need to update the public in terms of the prospective bids and contracts that could be awarded in connection with the work. And the board needs to have a discussion about whether or not to proceed with that process while the litigation process is pending. And then the third purpose is really, over the course of the last 9 months, the board has attempted to update the public relative to another appeal by the 10 residents relative to the high school project, which that appeal is now over. Those rights are closed, and the Board of Selectmen, I think, it's high time that the Selectmen have the ability to make public comment about that appeal without fear of inciting further appeals. So with that said, let me go through, first of all, the timeline of how we got to where we're at, hopefully give a quick explanation of the current status of the project, open it up to the board, and then to the audience. Many folks will remember that after the town meeting, special town meeting and ballot box votes at the end of calendar year 2011, the town proceeded with its plans to construct a new high school. An important piece of that construction process and development process was to file a notice of intent with the Wilmington Conservation Commission. A notice of intent is essentially an application for a conditional permit to proceed with construction as it pertains to wetlands and other resource areas. So you can think of the order of conditions that was issued by the Conservation Commission as a conditional permit to proceed. The decision of the Wilmington Conservation Commission and its issuance of an order of conditions came after a meeting on May 9th of 2012. That decision was appealed both by an abutter, Mr. O'Reilly, and by a 10-resident group, and I believe the spokesperson at that time was Mr. Lingenfelter. DEP then handled the first level of appeal and issued what's referred to as a superseding order of conditions. DEP issued that superseding order on July 13th of 2012. In substance, the superseding order allowed the project as had been contemplated to move forward. The same substantive project that had been permitted by the Conservation Commission was permitted by DEP. Subsequent to that issuance of the superseding order, Mr. O'Reilly and abutter again appealed that decision, as did a 10-resident group of which the spokesperson was Mr. McDonald. After going through that process, which involves an adjudicatory hearings process, a hearings officer is assigned to the case. They conduct a pre-screening conference at the office of DEP. That took the better part of a day. And after that process saw its way through, in October, the hearings officer issued a recommended final decision, which again, in substance, upheld the previous issuance by the Conservation Commission and by DEP at the first level. In accordance with the Code of Mass regulations, the hearings officer issued that recommended final decision, but subsequent to that, the commissioner of DEP adopts that decision. And do you have anything to say, Ms. McDonald? Okay. The hearings, no, I'm not suggesting that you speak. I just prefer that you not make faces to the board. After the hearings officer recommended the final decision, the commissioner of DEP, in fact, adopted that recommendation. That final decision was issued on October 22nd. That's the date at which the appellants had a 30-day right to appeal to Superior Court. In the interim, there was an attempt to convince the DEP to reconsider its final decision that was summarily denied. The hearings officer issued a recommended final decision to deny that motion to reconsider on November 8th. The DEP, I'm sorry, that was when the hearings officer issued that. DEP commissioner adopted that recommended final decision on the reconsideration on November 14th. On November 16th, Mr. O'Reilly, as the abutter, filed a complaint in Superior Court. And subsequent to that, the town was served with that complaint. That complaint rather includes 3 counts. It includes a count under Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, which is the typical body of regulations pursuant to which a person who believes he's been aggrieved by a decision of an administrative agency seeks judicial review of that decision. Mr. O'Reilly's complaint also includes 2 other counts. One is seeking a declaratory judgment from the court to declare that the Code of Mass Regulations that provides the framework for those appeals is unconstitutional. Then it includes a 3rd count which seeks injunctive relief to request the court to order a preliminary and permanent order to stop the project. The town is on track to file and answer responsive pleadings with the court and on the other party by January 16th. Again, our hope tonight is to address 3 things. Number 1 is the status of that particular litigation. As it stands, we expect, and again, that our comments need to be restrained on this because of the nature of the litigation and the fact that it is pending. I think that one can safely say that that particular action may be resolved as early as this spring or as late as the end of this calendar year, depending on any number of potential delays. Certainly, that time frame is something that the board will need to consider in terms of whether or not to move forward with the project. In terms of moving forward with the project, I also want to be, and I want to begin that discussion with the board. Before we do that, let me make sure that I'm clear with the general public as to what the board is considering this evening. At this point in time, there are bids expected from trade bidders on January 24th? Yes, on January 24th. In terms of these kinds of construction projects, there are what are commonly characterized as trade bidders and non-trade bidders. The trade bidders, things like masonry subcontractors, electrical subcontractors, plumbers, drywall, waterproofing, all those subcontractors that you often think of as the classic subs. They go through a bidding process. The awarding authority by our town charter is the town manager. And so in this case, the town manager with the design team and our management team will review the bids that are received by January 25th and decide whether or not to accept those bids. It is the consensus of the working group that is involved in this project on a day-to-day basis that it's in the town's best interest to proceed with that bidding process. And if the bids are acceptable, in fact, to instruct our construction manager to award those contracts. When I refer to the working group, certainly that includes our OPM, our construction manager. It includes the town manager, school superintendent, superintendent of public buildings, includes all of those folks. There is a clear consensus that, notwithstanding some of the calculated risks that are involved in proceeding with these contracts, that it makes sense to do that. Mr. Hull and I have discussed this at length, and he indicates that as the awarding authority, he is prepared to comment on this, but that he believes it's important for the town that the selectmen and the town manager are on the same page on this. So I don't want to put words in the manager's mouth, but suffice to say that he's looking for a vote from the board tonight relative to acceptance of bids and awarding of contracts. There's some information that not only want to share with the general public, but with the board in making this decision and having this discussion. We heard earlier tonight about the exorbitant increase in labor and materials that's occurred recently. And by recently, we're focused mostly on the year prior to this point in time. Based on national trends, which were advised by our OPM, that Boston typically would track the national trends. And the national trends that we've seen in the last year, which are commensurate with the delay that has been occasioned by these various appeals, there's been an increase in costs for what we would attribute to the trade bids, something to the order of about 2.6%. What's important to remember is that the non-trade bids, which are essentially site developers, site workers, construction workers, demolition, concrete, steel erection, and the turf field component of the project. All of those are non-trade bids, which will not be part of these bid packages that we'll receive by January 25th. Well, by and large, this delay is bad news. The good news is this, that we went with a construction manager at risk, which was widely supported, but a few people were critical of it. One of the benefits that we've realized from going with the CM at risk model is that they have been able to negotiate and to maintain prices with those non-trade bidders. So your site work, your turf field work, your demolition work, your concrete work, your steel erection work, we have, by and large, managed to insulate that from the overall increased cost of doing business in the last year. With respect to the trade bids, the rubber will hit the road when we open the bids on January 25th. But what we're expecting to see based on the national trends is that we will receive bids which will reflect an increased cost of approximately $1,755,000 that's attributable to the delay that's been occasioned to this point. I think more poignant is the increase that we see in the last 6 months in particular. The last 6 months alone, we expect that the bids will show us that it cost us about $1,060,000 just the last 6 months. So the town is in a position of assessing its risk in terms of proceeding with accepting bids and awarding contracts pending the litigation. And we're trying to make a common sense decision in light of our supreme confidence in prevailing on the merits of the case and our near certainty at the increase that's going to continue. Again, all the trend that we've seen in the last 6 months is fully expected to continue in the next 6 months to a year. So in round numbers, we're expecting that if we put off the work that we contemplate, it's likely to cost us somewhere in the ballpark of $1 million every 6 months. So with all of that said, I open it up to the board and invite any questions or comments relative to what the manager is requesting.
I don't have a problem showing full support towards the town manager, what he's requesting. I think that we all feel the same way, and I'm just one person. I know we all can speak our own minds, and I think we're all on the same page. We want to make sure that this high school project continues. We want to make sure it opens fairly reasonably at a short period of time. Unfortunately, it's put off for another year, and two words come to mind once again: time and money. That's what it comes down. You own a business. Sometimes you need to spend money to make money. And I'd like to make a comment later pertaining to something else, but we just need to show that we're on the same page, and I think we've demonstrated that from time and time again, and we've been very cordial and very polite to everybody. And I think it's time for us to show the support once again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I agree with Mr. McCoy. I would like to thank you and the town manager for all the work you've been doing in the high school building committee. I think, like the chairman said, we've been kind of biting our tongue for a while because of ongoing litigation. And I, for one, would never say a resident can't use any process that's within his laws. But to be part of this 10-person group and to be the head of it, and to be so irrelevant, immature, you're just such a little man that comes and acts like you do at a public meeting when we're talking real money, where your little appeals that you had the right to do and you continue to do, and you still act immature like a little man that you are, costing us right now $1.7 million and can cost us up to another $1 million plus every 6 months, is ridiculous. And I, again, would like to thank you, Town Manager and Mr. Chairman, for the work you've done and the professionalism that you've displayed in handling such an immature little man that's writing notes right now. I hope you're getting this on camera and laughing and making faces like the little person that he is. That's all I got, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Newhouse, for the chronology. I actually, it was helpful to me to think back to when we originally took the vote at the poll, as well as at the special town meeting that now seems so long ago. The support was so resounding, and it was emotional for so many because it was such a positive experience, I think, for so many folks who don't generally get involved in civic matters, but for this became so impassioned and so moved and motivated to participate in this process. And I feel sorry for those folks because they have had to endure the pain and anguish of having to wait and continue to have to wait because of the complaints, because of the appeals of a very small subset of our population. In spite of the Wilmington Conservation Commission and Mass DEP, through the adjudicatory hearings, a small number of people, ultimately, I would dare say one individual, has somehow professed to have some special set of knowledge, some special skills, something more unique, some more unique grasp on information than tremendously educated, highly professional engineers, architects, consultants, project managers, all who make their living doing this every single day, who work with the MSBA, who do these kind of projects, but somehow all of the knowledge and information that they have presented to us is somehow wrong, and one individual or a small subset of individuals within the community seem to have a unique set of information that has thwarted and hijacked this process up until this point. It's frustrating to me, and I know that it's frustrating to so many others. I'm emboldened, I'm made to feel relief, I guess, to some degree, that I think that we're coming to the light at the end of the tunnel. I know that we have to still continue to deal with our existing appeal with the abutter, but I find it reprehensible and shameful that these small number of folks have cost the town $1.75 million of their neighbors' money. I think it's shameful, reprehensible, and I think that the individual that I'm referring to should be embarrassed for holding signs up and showing us just a little man, I suppose, would probably be the best. So that all being said, I guess I had something else I wanted to say. Oh, yeah, talking about the calculated risk, about moving forward with authorizing the town manager to accept bids and award contracts after the 125 bid submissions. I will, too, also be in support of that. The phrase calculated risk was used a couple of times. I believe it's a very calculated and not very risky. So I think it's important for us to move forward and to try to, as much as we humanly can, save taxpayer dollars wherever we can. We owe it to them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Obviously, a lot's been said, regarding the project, and I know, there's been countless hours in sessions and meetings and in open forums, and the town has been able to weigh in, this board has been able to weigh in. I want to commend you, Chairman Newhouse, and also the town manager, and also Superintendent Benton. I know you've spent countless hours with your team, with the working group, with our partners that are working through this. I'm doing a lot of thinking about this, doing a lot of reading, trying to keep up on the current affairs, and I'm going to take a few extra moments to share some of that, because we've opened the doors to be able to do that tonight. I worked on the school committee, now here with the Board of Selectmen. It's been very, very clear for the last several years that the original intent with Jeff Hull and with Mike Kyer previously, and with the town as a whole, that the goal was to bring a new high school to fruition at some point in the town of Wilmington. And all the right steps have been done. The due diligence has been done. The feasibility study was done. A special election was done. A special town meeting was done. The overwhelming consensus of the townspeople is such that they wanted this to come to reality. That being the case, I feel in this seat, and even as a resident at town meeting, that we all collectively as a community came out of there with a commitment and a financial promise and a plan to bring that school to fruition, and it hasn't. The appeals, people have rights, residents have rights to do that, and it's nothing personal. I'm not intending to be inflammatory towards anyone, and I don't want to disrespect anyone, but I feel that I've been elected to this seat, and this is a seat of the people, and I feel that for the overwhelming majority, for the 3,700 people that voted at the special election in favor of this, for the close to 1,500 people, or 1,426 specifically, that voted for this at a special town meeting, that I am in a position right now as an elected official to take an action on this, to take this one step forward and to get the ball rolling. And I feel at this time, the time has come for us to do something about this as a board and for us to move forward. We've consulted with our legal team in executive session. We've talked openly in public session that we feel eminently confident that the town is going to come out on the prevailing side. This is not a perfect situation for all of us. Ultimately, decisions need to be made in light of difficult circumstances. And to wait for this, it's not just about money. Let's get back to our fundamental principles, which was to be all about the children and all about the teachers. And I've spent many hours with the school committee end of things and also with the Board of Selectmen. And the most critical piece here is to preserve the relationship and the educational transfer that exists between a teacher and a student. And to deprive a graduating class another year and to take another class to not have the ability to graduate from a new institution of learning known as Wilmington High School, I think is a downright travesty. And I feel at this point, I don't want to overstep any other further comments from the members of the board, and I know, Chairman Newhouse, you may have additional comments. I'm prepared to make whatever motion that may be prepared to take the next step to bring this to a vote at this time.
Very well. There is one important point that I neglected to bring out for the benefit of the general public, and in part, I'm sure I did that because all the notes I prepared are sitting on my printer at the office. The other reason is because the board is well aware of the following. One important aspect of where we're at is that when the Conservation Commission issued an order of conditions, which essentially conditionally permitted the project from their jurisdictional viewpoint, and then that was appealed, by operation of law, that conditional permit didn't exist. So by virtue of the fact that an appeal was taken, we did not have this conditional permit. And that second level of appeal from the appeal of the superseding order of conditions, which ultimately went to the DEP commissioner, who issued the final order of conditions, that same situation was the case. That the appeal rendered the conditional permit void. It didn't exist. We are in a slightly different situation right now. Now that the final order of conditions has been issued by DEP and an appeal has been taken to Superior Court, absent some other action or court order, that conditional permit still exists. And a Superior Court is not going to take that action unilaterally. So for those at home who might be listening saying, well, geez, I guess I'm in agreement, it makes sense to me. The town wants this school, is committed to the school, we've appropriated the money, makes sense to me that you're going to move forward, but why didn't you do that last December? That's the reason why. And it, certainly we needed to sit tight until we were served the complaint for Superior Court before we make a decision like this. So the other point that I did not mention is that the trade bids that will be opened on January 24th, 5th, I keep it, January 24th, those bids will be locked in for a period of 90 days thereafter. So in addition to having some time to deal with this litigation in the near term, we'll continue to deal with it the intermediate term and the long term, and we've got that period of time to deal with things. So I think that was important. To respond to Ms. O'Connell's recommendation for a motion, so as not to tie the hands of the town manager, so as to enable him, along with our team, to review the bids and to either accept or reject those bids. We want to make sure that we're not unduly restrictive here. By the same token, we want to make sure that we are clear in our support for awarding the contracts based on the bids if those bids are satisfactory. So with that, before we entertain a motion, actually, why don't we try and answer any questions or comments from the audience, and then we can present a proposed motion to see if it's acceptable.
Isn't there an injunction?
Yes, in the back,
I
Ms.
just want to
Murphy.
say thank you guys so much for all your time and energy, volunteering your time, because that's what it's all about here in our town. And I can't wait for a new high school to be built. My niece would have been the first full graduating class, but unfortunately she won't be. That's okay. So, but I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, Mr. Lingenfelter.
I can't speak for all the members of the appeals thus far. I can speak to what my general understanding is for most of them, but I can speak for myself. And I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding between the board and most of my understanding of the appellants. Most of the appellants, that as I understand, and speaking for myself, this is my opinion, nobody that I'm aware of, except maybe Mr. McDonald, was against the new high school per se. I don't think this is the best option, but I'm reasonably certain that all the appellants were against not cleaning up the oil. And I think that's something that you didn't really address in your comments as you talked about it. And most of the people that were involved in the appeal were concerned about the fact that the oil wasn't going to be addressed. And you talk about the costs and the expenses, and it seems to me that if we had just cleaned the oil up in the first place, it probably would have ultimately ended up being cheaper than to have gone through all this appeals process. There were several specific points that weren't brought up along the process, that like the surface grade is going to be reduced. That didn't come out till later in the process. And so actually the heavily contaminated soil, and there were some engineering changes between what was formerly contaminated, and then there was biodegradation, and then there was the heavy 6-oil plume that's out there that was described in the process by the LSPs and the engineering firm. So they modified the depth of contamination, but it was stated at town meeting that contamination was going to be at 13 to 14 feet. And then the LSP opinion that was stated to us that we didn't actually have it until June 29th, 2012, even though pretty much, if not outright stated there was an opinion, it was certainly implied that there was an opinion at the special town meeting back in December 2011. So a lot of the righteous indignation that you're showing towards the people of the appeals, the most of them, to my understanding, you're not giving them the benefit of the doubt as to what was motivating them. You're just telling them that it's for the children and we're horrible people, and that's not what it was about. It was about wanting a clean environment, and it was never stated at the town meeting that the surface grade was going to be reduced 5 feet. So the contamination, a lot of it is actually going to be located at 6 feet below grade. And the terms and conditions that AOL actually say on file at the registry of deeds in Lowell that contamination is going to be at 8 feet. So there's a lot of technical, I'm an LSP, there's a lot of technical problems with the current LSP opinion that you have. And that didn't go away. The Code Officer Jones didn't say that my objections to AOL were wrong. He just said he wasn't going to allow it in the wetlands process. That, you haven't even approached that. That's still coming your way. There's not an appeal process per se with the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup, but there is a process for asking for audits, and we've asked for information on the site during the appeals process that wasn't provided. We've asked for information from the town that wasn't provided. There is a process where to ask for information that hasn't been provided. I think it's the Supervisor for Public Records. The Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup, the FCP process allows for different reporting for changes in site conditions that may or may not have occurred out there. We don't know that that's the case because we haven't been afforded all the information that we've asked for. A lot of that information is going to come out in the court case that I understand Mr. O'Reilly is pursuing, and the town and the DEP won't have the option to say we're not going to provide it. They're going to be compelled to provide a lot of things. And there is, like I say, there's not a specific appeals process with the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup and the MCP that there is with the wetlands, but there is a process to request what's called an audit review, and that hasn't happened yet, and that will be happening. And so there are a lot of other things that are, I hope that your experts have been providing you information on a lot of other things that are still coming down the road, because, and I repeat this again, I was never opposed to this high school. I was opposed to the fact that you weren't going to clean the oil up, that you misrepresented at town meeting that the grades were going to change and the depth of the contamination, those issues. And also at town meeting it was never stated that, well, first of all, to back up, you put a really good spin, you know, which is what you need to do because it's your position. There was an initial order of conditions from the Conservation Commission for the turf field that was outright withdrawn because it was totally, technically inappropriate, and then, so that was withdrawn. You didn't mention that one.
I'd be happy to comment on that and to address, you know, I wanted to give you your chance to speak. I'd love to respond to a number of comments that you just made.
2 more minutes and I'll stop talking. I'm almost done.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It would have been helpful and I think fair at town meeting to have told people that we were going to lose the parking lot at the town park and that we were going to lose the pedway, and there are certain other aspects of the project that a lot of people just aren't apprised of. And it very well may come out that the ultimate, where this project is going to go is something that's, we don't even, I don't know and you don't know. You may be surprised 6 months from now actually what's going to really happen. And I think that, you know, I could probably keep pontificating and talking for quite a while, but I'll just hold it. But that's, I just wanted to be clear that for me personally, I think we could have had a better proposal. That I'm not against the new high school, but I absolutely wanted that oil cleaned up. As an LSP and a geologist and an environmental professional, I foresee future problems with that oil out there. I know that you don't think that, but that's the main motivator that drove most of the people that I'm aware of. And it wasn't about being hateful and fighting the high school, and you don't give us a chance to have said that. So that's, I just wanted to make sure that, like I said, I could probably keep talking, but that's the real core I wanted to put out there. If you had just cleaned it up, and maybe knocked down the turf field now and done something different, you probably would have already been working on the school right now and building it. Even though I don't think it's a good proposal, you would have already been working on that. You didn't talk to us about it, and so instead of spending $1 million to clean the oil up and maybe having no appeal, you just kept beating us with a drum, and the people in the press, and you know, had threats to me personally come through, and You just went the whole wrong way on that whole thing.
When he says stress, is that indicating from us?
Not from you personally, but all the other people that...
Listen, I would like to respond to a number of things that you said.
Did you
First of
excuse me,
all-
Mr. McDonald, did you just make a hand gesture to me? Are you threatening me? No. Did you just make a hand gesture to
I'm a
me?
little man, I couldn't do that to a kid like you.
Mr. Chairman, I feel threatened now. He's giving me the finger like he's doing something like this.
I was just clapping.
Yeah, no, you weren't, Mr. McDonald.
No,
You're a big boy, I'm a
Miss-
little man though, aren't
No,
you?
you're a little boy.
that's enough. Mr. Lingenfelter, let me try and respond to the whole mouth, there's so much there. First of all, I'm well aware that your motivating factor was our treatment of the AUL. I'm aware of that based on some comments you've made, but with respect to the other appellants, I don't even, my turn. With respect to the other appellants, it's kind of hard to know what their thoughts were when they didn't attend a single Conservation Commission meeting, they didn't attend town meeting, they didn't take one step to try and find out what the substance of this project was all about, and now you want to say that the people you know were concerned about the AUL. I think that's disingenuous. I also think that when we have LSPs working for us who have 75 to 100 years of experience collectively with projects this size, just like this one, and they give us recommendations, those are the recommendations that we live with. What I find disappointing, and again, I keep returning to the word disingenuous, is for you to sit here and say that somehow the costs of this delay have been occasioned by the town based on our treatment of the AUL, when our LSPs reached out to you, invited to sit down with you to try and resolve your questions, at which time you indicated, I know that this issue was not properly before this hearing, but I'm not going to get a better venue to try and air my concerns. So notwithstanding what you say is support for a high school project, because of concerns that you have, which are discounted and dismissed by nearly 100 years of experience for the people that we pay to give us that advice. Notwithstanding that, notwithstanding an invitation to a Board of Selectmen's meeting at which we described the cost of the delay and estimated it to be about $3 million, notwithstanding all of that, you still elected to participate in a process to address your hang-ups in a process that you knew couldn't properly be used for that. So, please.
That's not
You're
correct.
speaking for me, sir. That's not correct.
Totally incorrect.
So in any case, if you're going to sit here and somehow blame everybody else because we didn't satisfy all of your concerns, there's a number of good reasons why we did it, not the least of which was that we had very experienced and capable people that we pay who disagree with you and who still disagree with you.
So when you say collectively, I'm on par with them. And if you put 3 or 4
Yeah,
LSPs in a room...
How long have you been an LSP in Massachusetts?
2009. But I've been working in the industry since
No,
'86. I opted not to get it. There's a lot of personal liability associated with having an LSP license. I opted not to get it until recently. And I did meet at the town manager asked me to meet with them. I did meet with them. I expressed my complaints to them, and they pretty much told me, "Go away. We're not going to deal with you at all." That's what they told me. So I did. They did not want to negotiate. They didn't want to negotiate. And it was if you refer back about the meeting you talked about, all the email chatter about we're going to have these groups come, we're going to boo down the people when they get up and speak. And so I went to the meeting and I was going to listen and I was planning on staying. My son ended up having a cough. Mr. Hull provided some water. I could have sent my wife home, but I didn't. There were a lot of, I restate my position as to what motivated me, and I restated them, and you have your position, and I think that the town should have reached out more, and rather than being more forceful about it, they should have reached out more and been more honest about things on their end of things.
And should have done what you wanted without regard to the advice of experienced people. And the cost of which you just sat there and said, and just remove it for $1 million. Well, I think there was a good reason then for their advice. Yes, in the back.
Chairman, Board, I'd like to commend you for what you've done through this whole project. You've kept your cool, and it's the hardest thing to do. Elected officials who are not paid and who are keeping under control. The one problem I see with this whole process was that I believe that the group that always filed the complaints had the wrong leader. And that's what caused the biggest steer, was that they could never get their point across properly because of the leader they had. And I commend you. That's all I want to say is I am proud to be a resident of Wilmington, and I am proud to be a supporter of your board.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. Question that I want to ask you or have answered is, has the town considered its rights of eminent domain with regards to the abutters on Baldwin Street?
The quick answer is that the board is well aware of that, that possibility. It hasn't made sense through a process in which there was more than one appellant, that process wouldn't necessarily render the litigation moot. Now that we're in a process in which there is only one appellant, you may want to stick around because I think we'll probably address that by motion later in the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else? Okay. Ms. O'Connell had asked, you know, that we put something on the table, and the proposed motion that we're looking at would be that the Board of Selectmen hereby authorize the town manager to proceed with acceptance of trade bids to be received by the town on or before January 24th, 2013, and to proceed with awarding both trade and non-trade contracts by Gilbane upon the acceptance of those bids, reserving all of the town's rights under Mass General Laws, Chapter 149A.
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. Anything further? All in favor? It's unanimous. I just also wanted to offer some thoughts in the same manner that some of my colleagues have. And I expected that folks would make some valid points. So over the weekend, I was thinking about, you know, how I would make my point about the 10 resident appeal and what I thought of it. And, you know, rather than giving a speech, I wanted to share just a list of descriptive words that I think describe that 10 resident appeal process. Abusive process, amateurish, frivolous, meritless, disingenuous, obstructionist, ill-conceived, ill-informed, ill-prepared, wasteful, inept, delusional, bad faith, illogical, baseless, costly, time-consuming, unprofessional, oblivious, shamefully self-indulgent, mean-spirited, and abject failure. So I feel remiss in not offering my thoughts as well. Any other comments from the board? Okay. If we could, Mr. Hull, move to communications.
Under communications, the first item is correspondence from Tony Sievers from Diversified Project Management, who you heard from earlier. This document outlines the issues that led to the increase in the cost of the North Intermediate windows. I'll just summarize. The estimate for the replacement of windows and doors at the North Intermediate has come in significantly higher than the estimate used for preliminary planning and the appropriation vote taken by the town in 2012. The preliminary budget was determined by using the cost of the window and door project completed at the Shawshene Elementary School in 2010. The town of Wilmington recognized an excellent value on the Shawshene School window project. The contractor was motivated to keep costs down. The designer and project manager were willing to perform the work at reduced fees. The configuration of the windows allowed for an efficient and cost-saving installation. All these factors resulted in a project that was completely below market value. Unfortunately, this became the standard by which the planning for the North Intermediate Window project was based. The current construction climate, along with the more difficult scope of work, has resulted in costs that are not commensurate with the previous costs, and he goes on to detail that. Next, we have correspondence from Dan Deutsch from Deutsch Williams. This is directed to Michael Sullivan, clerk at Middlesex Superior Court. We enclose the filing and docketing in the above action, which is Gerald O'Reilly versus Kenneth L. Kimmel, Middlesex Superior Court, civil action. Notice of appearance of Daniel R. Deutsch for the defendants, Winifred McGowan, Jeffrey M. Hull, Michael Newhouse in the town of Wilmington. He's just advising the court of our appearance. We have correspondence from the, actually this is the Mass General Law that was adopted, Chapter 372, an act dissolving the redevelopment authority in the town of Wilmington. Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives and the General Court assembled and by the authority of the same as follows. Notwithstanding Sections 4 and 5 of the Chapter 129B of the general laws and any other general or special laws to the contrary, the town of Wilmington Redevelopment Authority is hereby dissolved, and any funds held in the name of the authority by a banking institution shall revert to the general fund of the town of Wilmington. Just by way of information, after we received notice of this vote, I instructed the town accountant to confirm the amount that was still under the redevelopment authority. That money, which is a little over $7,000, has been transferred to the town's general fund. Next, we have correspondence from Police Chief Michael Bagonis regarding CTC Gold, 510 Main Street. I've attached a report from Lieutenant Brian Pupa relevant to a violation of the town bylaw for receiving and holding of secondhand metals by CTC Gold Refinery located at 501 Main Street. The establishment's owners were fined for failing to hold the received metal for the required 30 days. He has attached the report for the review by the Board of Selectmen. Please, I was asking that I provide the report to the board, which has been provided. We have correspondence from David Zinsner, the Vice President in Finance and Chief Financial Officer for Analog Devices. This is with regard to the Massachusetts Economic Development Program in Wilmington. As we have discussed on various occasions during the past year, Analog Devices has been planning an expansion of the Wilmington campus, assuming the town of Wilmington approves our request for real estate tax relief. The scope of the expansion, as detailed in our previous communications, is unchanged. However, given the poor economic environment coupled with unprecedented global uncertainty, we believe it is prudent to place on hold the TIF approval process until we have better visibility on the timing. We understand that the next steps, gaining Selectmen's approval, creating warrant articles, and answering questions at town meeting, will require specificity as to timing. Under the current circumstances, we believe it would be more productive for the town and the ADI, and in fact, the next steps would be more successful if we reinitiate the TIF approval process when we can speak more confidently about the timing. We do greatly appreciate all of your support on this initiative to date. We look forward to bringing it to a successful closure as soon as the business climate allows us to do so. We have a letter from Gerald D. Perry, Director of Accounts. This is to Melanie Hagman, the business manager at the Shawshene Tech. Based upon the unaudited balance sheet submitted, I hereby certify the amount of excess and deficiency as of July 1, 2012 for the Shawshene Valley Voc Tech as being $868,528. Essentially, this is their version of so-called free cash or available funds. This correspondence comes from Jeffrey Y., from the Department of Telecommunications and Cable. The Department of Telecommunications and Cable is committed to the public's awareness of telecommunications and cable, particularly its knowledge of the Lifeline program, which includes telephone and wireless service. Lifeline is a state and federal program that makes basic telephone and wireless services available to low-income consumers. The program provides eligible applicants with either a discount off their monthly landline telephone bill or, in many cases, a free wireless phone, including an allotment of free monthly minutes. The DTC is dedicated to sharing communication information to low-income consumers that might not otherwise have access to basic telephone service. The DTC believes that members of your organization would benefit greatly from learning about Lifeline and the services DTC provides. Enclosed are several copies of the Lifeline brochures which describe the program in more detail. Also provided are several copies of the Cable Buying Guide, which provides helpful information on purchasing cable services. That information was provided.
Jeff, if I may, does your office forward copies of this to the Housing Authority or members throughout the town hall that would service the populations that could benefit from this?
I believe we have sent it over to the senior, to Terry Marciello, but I'll confirm that.
Okay. Just a thought.
The next item is a memorandum from Carol Hamilton. This is with regard to the meeting that was held involving MAPC back on January 8th. At the meeting on January 8th, Planning Board representatives from MAPC presented preliminary plans prepared in conjunction with the town department heads of land that should be identified as available for development and land that should be considered for preservation of open space. Infrastructure necessary to support these uses is also identified. Included is a map showing the areas, a sheet defining the terms, and a key to be used with the map further explaining the areas identified. The map also shows areas similarly identified by abutting MAPC communities. At the meeting, additional infrastructure improvement was identified for the Butters Row Bridge. No additional parcels were added. Please note the Yentall Farm parcel is not on the map as it is already under municipal control. The information will be included in MAPC's regional planning documents. It is likely that the parcels will be, some parcels will be eliminated as MAPC applies its policy filters to what the local communities have identified. The information will form a preliminary basis for the distribution of funds for open space acquisition, infrastructure improvement as part of the TIP and promotion of economic development statewide. Wilmington's participation in the project will enhance its competitiveness should it apply for grant funds available through the Executive Office of Housing and Community Development. If the Selectmen have any questions, either collectively or individually, happy to discuss this further. We have correspondence from the Massachusetts Municipal Association. This is a bulletin regarding the Governor's proposal for sweeping consolidation of local housing authorities. Governor Deval Patrick announced today, this was dated the 10th of January, that he will file legislation to regionalize the operation and financial management of local housing authorities. In a major shift of how public housing property and programs are managed in Massachusetts, the governor's bill would consider or consolidate the current roster of 240 local housing authorities into 6 regional authorities that would, in the words of the administration, quote, take over ownership and fiscal operational management of the public housing in the Commonwealth, end quote. The text of the legislation has not yet been realized. However, according to the administration's description of the plan unveiled by the governor at the State House press conference at noon on Thursday, January 10th, each of the 6 new regional housing authorities would be governed and administered by a single executive director with a new governing board consisting of 9 appointees by the governor, and be supported by central and regional management staff and local site managers. The governor's official announcement said the legislation will allow communities to, quote, retain control over the land use and significant redevelopment decisions, including change of use, ownership, or financial structure of an existing building or vacant land, end quote. And the new regional housing authority, quote, will also be required to seek local input into an annual plan that outlines the projected capital and operating expenditures and tenant activities, end quote. The governor's bill, when filed, will be referred to the Joint Committee on Housing for a public hearing later this year, provided more time for full analysis of the details. The proposal is expected to be highly controversial, with most housing authority executive directors and commissioners opposing it. The MMA encourages you to contact your legislators as soon as possible if you have concerns about having the housing authority and its assets consolidated into the governor's new plan.
Excuse me, Mr. Hull. This here now, is this down the line, perhaps their little office down there at Deming Way may be gone, and they'll have to go to another city or town, similar to, like for SNAP and fuel assistance? I'm sorry, not fuel assistance, the welfare office now is in Malden.
Mm-hmm.
But that used to be in every city and town. Now, if a person wants to apply for SNAP or some other sort of assistance, they have to go down Malden. Is that something that's going to happen down the line there with our residents at Deming Way? Or could happen with this?
It's possible. They haven't outlined the structure. One possibility may be that they would still have some kind of a satellite office here, but there wouldn't be an executive director. It would be some type of administrative personnel.
Is this something I know we've done in the past, maybe putting a letter or see how our local legislators feel about this? Sending letters to them, see how they feel about this regionalization? If
You can certainly do that.
No.
I wonder if our housing authority members, I'm sure they'll want to weigh in any case, but maybe we'll seek them out as well.
Is the board looking for a letter to go out to each of our senator and representatives?
Please.
Okay.
I just think it would be a big burden on the seniors that we have in town here, that some don't drive, and they get their services right now. They can walk to the office, and I think this would be a big burden, as it is with the Department of Transitional Assistance now being regionalized.
I'm going to read a phrase from the legislation, from the governor's statement. It says, the legislation consolidates the state's 240 housing authorities into 6 regional housing authorities and builds on the steps the Patrick Murray administration has taken to increase transparency, accountability, performance, efficiency, innovation, blah, 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 blah. And it goes on to say other things. It sounds, on its face, my knee-jerk reaction is, oh, okay, they're going to save money, it's going to be more efficient, and it's going to be more modern. But a regional controlled agency seems like another layer of administrivia that doesn't serve the constituencies, like you say. I mean, now you're forcing folks potentially. I don't see what's going to happen here, but regional authorities scare me, and I think that regional authority would not necessarily have the best interests of what's right for the people of Wilmington at heart. And in the scenario we have now, those folks would. So I'd be very interested to hear what our legislative delegation feels about this issue, and I'm anxious to have that conversation with them and learn more about this. So thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I agree. The Office of Transitional Assistance used to be in every city and town welfare, and now it's regionalized, and it is a burden for a lot of people to get down there to apply for food stamps or whatever else they need from them. And I see this going that way, and you're talking seniors. That in a way is our housing authority. So I think it would be worth looking into anyway. Thank you.
Next is a memorandum to the board. I'm pleased to inform you that for the 8th time in 9 years, the town of Wilmington has been recognized by the Massachusetts Municipal Association as an award recipient in the annual town report contest, Wilmington was named the third-place recipient in Category 1, which is for communities with a population of 12,500 or greater. You will recall that Wilmington received first-place awards for the annual report contest in 2003, 4, and 6, was a second-place recipient in 2005 and 2009, and was awarded third place in 2007 and 2008. Enclosed is a copy of the announcement from the MMA. Debt of gratitude goes out to you and all who participated in the formulation of this important document. Please extend my appreciation to each member of your staff who contributed their time and talents to this important effort. Special commendation is extended to members of the town manager's staff under the expert guidance of Beverly Dalton, who spent untold hours in the production of this report. This went also to the department heads and to the superintendent. I would just like to specifically recognize Beverly because she's the real quarterback on this and collects the information from all the departments and puts it together in a cohesive way, does the proofing along with her staff, and it's just a real testament to her efforts.
Thanks, Bev.
Congratulations.
Good girl.
Next on the agenda, under correspondence, is a memorandum from me to the Finance Committee and department heads, CCing the board and the school committee, Joanne Benton and Charlie Lyons. This is the outline for the public meetings for the budget. Below is a schedule established by the Finance Committee to review the department's fiscal year 2014 proposed budgets. All the meetings will be held in Room 9 at the Town Hall. Meetings are scheduled to begin at 7 p.m. and departmental reviews are scheduled to take place in the order listed. An approximate starting time is listed next to each department. Please notify the board or committee that falls in your department's jurisdiction of the appropriate meeting dates. Additional Finance Committee meetings may be held as necessary. We start off on January 31st. This is going to be a general discussion, an overview of the town's revenues, general government expenditures, including debt service, unclassified statutory charges, insurance accounts, and the miscellaneous accounts. Then on February 5th, which is Tuesday, the Planning Board and Conservation are on deck for 7 o'clock, followed by the Town Clerk, Building Inspector, Board of Appeals, and then the Board of Health. Then on Thursday, February 7th, starting off at 7, the Public Buildings Department, followed by the Department of Public Works, including the Water and Sewer Division. Tuesday, February 12th, beginning at 7, we have the Recreation Department, followed by Public Library and Elderly Services. Tuesday, February 19th, we have Veterans Services and the Historical Commission. Tuesday, February 26th, the Police Department, Public Safety Central Dispatch, and the Fire Department. And then Tuesday, March 5th, is the Wilmington Public Schools and the Shawshene Tech. Then also under correspondence, I have an email from Richard Carnival from the town of North Reading. The Board of Selectmen has directed me to submit a truck exclusion request application to the Mass DOT for part of Chestnut Street in North Reading. The alternate route they selected includes Route 62, Lowell Street in both North Reading and Wilmington, I-93, I-95, Route 128, and Haverhill Street in Reading. The Mass DOT requires a written concurrence or non-concurrence from a community in which an alternate truck route is proposed. The town of North Reading requests a written concurrence or non-concurrence from your community supporting the alternate truck exclusion route through your community. Just by way of information, when this came in back in early December, there wasn't any real detail provided. Asked Don Onesite, the Public Works Superintendent, to comment on it. He outlined briefly what the process was and suggested that we needed additional detail I did receive some information just today from the town administrator in North Reading, and have forwarded that to Dawn. We're also expecting, I think it was a traffic study that was actually received today, and they're going to detail the actual route. So when that becomes clearer, we'll be bringing that back to the board. Under board to consider, we have a license agreement to be entered into between the board and the Wilmington Farmers Market. If you recall, there was the Farmers Market made a presentation, I believe back in November, requesting use of the Swain School property for continuation of their farmers market. It was the board's agreement to go forward that, and this simply memorializes the conditions that they would operate under.
Well, first of all, it's my assumption here that there are no changes substantively to the agreement since last year, and that just the dates have changed, right?
That's correct.
Okay. At that, do we have any questions, comments, or a motion from the board?
I'll make a motion that we grant the license to conduct the farmer's market on town property as outlined by the contract here.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Made and seconded. Anything further? All in favor? Unanimous?
Just a couple of points on this. I'll distribute this for a signature. There are two places where a signature is required, and also there is a certificate of insurance that they will provide, but that will be made available in February. We've got its signature pages are tabbed.
Start one going this way. Going that way. Thank you.
Next, under the board to consider, we have a request for the use of the town common and gazebo. This is from the Recreation Department, Debbie Cipriani, Recreation Director.
Do we have any questions, comments, or a motion?
I just have a comment that I love that we're talking about authorizing the use of the common in July. Just puts me in the right frame of mind right now. That said, I'd move to approve the use of the town common and gazebo for the summer concert series for the dates prescribed and requested by Deborah Cipriani.
Second?
Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor? It's unanimous.
We have board to consider request of Jim Satterley, auctioneer from Concord Auction Center, for a one-day auction license to be held on Saturday, January 19th, for property located at 1 Jewel Drive in Wilmington. This license just requires a signature by the chair.
Were there any objections from any department heads?
Received a feedback from the building inspector. There are no zoning issues at this location. The police chief indicates upon completing an investigation, the Wilmington Police Department recommends approval of the one-day auction license requested by Mr. James A. Satterley of Concord Auction Center, auctioneer.
Questions, comments, or a motion?
I make a motion we grant the auctioneer license for the one-day auction at the Concord Auction Center on 1 Jewel Drive.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor? It's unanimous.
we have board to consider accepting a gift of land of approximately 10 acres to the Care, Custody, and Control of the Conservation Commission from August and Mary Joyce Westoner. Said land located on Wildwood Street, map 61, parcel 4. Just by way of memorandum from Carol Hamilton, the Director of Planning and Conservation, this gift of land has been in the works for a period of time. The owner has finally prepared the documents for transfer. Winifred has reviewed the gift and found it acceptable. The Conservation Commission has voted to receive the gift. The land connects 2 parcels already owned by the town and is wetland adjacent to the Maple Meadow Brook. No town meeting action is required if the gift is for the care and custody of the Conservation Commission. The parcel is primarily wet. So that's the letter from Carol.
And
there's a-
presume council has reviewed the deed?
Yes.
Questions, comments, or motion? I just note that there's, appears to be, based on the assessor's map, one privately owned parcel which is adjacent to it, but that there are 2 town-owned parcels on either side of it. So a good portion of it is abuts town-owned land. Questions, comments, or motion?
You lose the tax revenue?
Questions, comments, or motion?
I make the motion that we accept the gift of land of approximately 10 acres for Care, Custody, and Control Conservation Commission from August and Mary Joyce Webster.
Second?
And seconded, all in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, and that's all we have on the agenda, Jeff. You didn't
Yes.
receive anything last minute, right?
No.
Okay, public comment.
Yeah, how come carpenters, iron workers, and site workers are not considered trade contractors and are not vote for competitive bid and are sent to register?
You're out of line, sir. You're out of order. You're not been recognized by the chair.
Yeah.
New business or committee reports?
Mr. Chairman, under new business, if you want, when we were talking under appointments at 7:20 relative to the status of the high school, I said I would like to bring something up later. And I can either do that now, or if you would want, I could wait at the end of important dates. I'd like to make a quick comment and offer a motion.
Okay, please do with the quick comment, and then we'll figure out the motion, or if we do important dates. Go ahead.
Say that again now?
Why don't you offer your comments, and then we'll figure out how to entertain the motion.
Yeah, no, the bottom line is, many, many months ago, I remember stating that when it's all said and done, that it would cost the taxpayers close to $3 million relative to these appeals. And I don't proclaim to know anything. I sat and I listened in that auditorium, and the professionals we hired said to us that it's going to cost us close to $3 million. And an individual in the audience said, where did I come up with that figures? And I remember you saying you were out of order. So, once again, we're relying on the professionals, and I need to rely on the professionals so I can, of clear mind, come up with the best vote I possibly can. And I know all of us from time to time, we're out Market Basket or Lucci's, and we bump into folks, and that happens to all of us. And folks ask us about the appeal process. And I tell them, when it's all said and done, it's going to probably cost us $3 million. People are outraged by that. And the biggest losers in this community are the kids and actually the taxpayers that are going to end up spending the $3 million. Some people we even bump into, and I'm sure we do it here, that say, I didn't even vote for the project, but I lost, we need to move on, and I would hate to see us spend all that money. And can you imagine what we could spend $3 million on at the end of the day? Now, Mr. Chairman, if you could mention, you stated that you actually come up with the hard numbers. So it's just not numbers that we pulled out of the air. There's actually hard numbers. And what did you say earlier?
Just to be clear, we have numbers that are hard numbers, and what nationally there's been as an average.
Right.
The hard numbers specifically pertaining to this project will, the rubber meets the road
No, I
on January
understand.
24th when we get the
No, I
bids.
understand.
But
And
you
once
got the
ag-
gist of it on the money.
And once again, right,
Yeah.
the professionals projected to us what it could actually cost us. And it's unfortunate. Sometimes I believe that, in business or individuals, sometimes we need to spend money to make money. I truly believe we need to spend money to save money. And I would like to offer a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we go into executive session after this meeting to discuss eminent domain process relative to the property located at 65 Warwood Street.
Okay, the way you worded that motion, we certainly can do that, and if we have a second, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded, and just as a point of clarification, upon an affirmative vote, we'll adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session after important dates and the open session is concluded. So, with that clarification, all in favor? It's unanimous. Anything else for new business?
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Anything else? Anything else down here?
Over here, please. Just wanted to remind residents that the Yentile Farm Committee survey is out for the public to complete, and that survey is actually located on the town website, as well as on the Wilmington Library website and the Wilmington Public Schools website. There's also paper copies available in the tax collector's office and also in the Recreation Department. That survey is open until January 31st. We're trying to get as many residents to complete that survey. We will have an update for the Board of Selectmen, not this month, but in future meeting dates. We're still working that through. But we are making progress, and the next public meeting is February 4th. So I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I'll echo that, Judy. I took I filled out a survey a couple weeks ago, and it was very quick. It was easy to access. It took me very little time, so I encourage, it's not one of these long things that's going to take a half hour out of your time, so just carve out a few moments and do that. I'm reluctant to open up an old wound. I think we're trying all as a society to heal and to move on from the terrible events that happened in Connecticut just a month ago. But we hadn't met, I don't believe, we haven't met since that occurred, and so I'm fairly confident that I speak for all of Wilmington in offering our condolences to all those folks there and anyone who may have been affected by it. It was certainly a tragedy, and I continue to be burdened by the sorrow and the horrible events of that day. I just want to also make mention of the fact that the Mass Municipal Association annual conference is coming up. It's scheduled for January 24th and 25th. I have registered and will be attending. There are a number of different breakout sessions and meetings of the Mass Selectmen's Association and other things. So I will take copious notes and try to cull it down to something substantive and useful and report back to you, my colleagues, when I return. Thank you. Are you going to be there? This is going.
I don't have anything further, so if we could get important dates from the manager, and then we will, in accordance with the vote, adjourn to executive session.
January 28th, the town offices will be closed for Martin Luther King Day. January 21st, that is. January 28th is the next Selectmen's meeting, and the fiscal 2014 budget presentation will be done at that meeting. February 1st, the last day to submit petition warrant articles for inclusion on the warrant for the annual town meeting on May 4th, 2013.
Thank you. The board stands adjourned to executive session. Thank you.